Listos, Vera.
Brenda, please.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. We'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining us. And I suggest that each of us introduce ourselves before the session starts. Start with Dr. Norma.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Nice to meet you today. We will start this important meeting with you. This is really the last but not the least, of course. We are expecting to hear you with all your wisdom and your knowledge about your cultures and your sites that you think they are very, very important for you, and of course will be very important for us. We appreciate very much to be here today with us. And without these words, I would like to welcome you to this meeting, and on behalf of POP movement, we welcome you, and of course, with the United Nations representing by Vera, we expect to have you a beautiful and wonderful meeting today. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mira. Thank you, Vera. And yeah, we are waiting for you to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Norma. Alexia, the floor is yours. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, sure. My name is Alexia Munoz. I'm a POP training mentor. I'm from Mexico, and I'm very excited to be participating in this meeting. Thanks you, Meda.
Trisha. Trisha. Okay, Philo.
Hello, everybody. This is Philo Magdalene, youth mentor from the south of India. I'm really glad to be here, and I look forward to listening to Ms. Brenda today. Welcome.
Thank you, Philo. Albert, the floor is yours.
My name is Alberto Saldamando. I work with the Indigenous Environment Network, and I was invited by Mendahi to participate in these meetings. I did participate on Monday, I think, and I've been unable to do it this week, but I thought I would check in today and see how things were going and listen to what people have to say and learn something. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Vanessa?
Thank you so much for that. Good morning, everybody. Vanessa Hernandez, Pop Youth Mentor of the Pop Movement. And I'm really excited to be here with all of you and learning from the original nations. I think it's really important to have these meetings. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Brenda. Thank you, Vera. Thank you, Mira.
Thank you so much. Ms. Vera, would you like to go first?
Hi, thank you, Meda. My name is Vera. I work for the World Council of Peoples for the United Nations, and we are one of the organizers for this event, along with Mindahi Bastida, the brilliant mind behind all the concepts and the subjects that have been discussed on this week, and with Ash Pachauri and Norma, Dr. Norma, and the amazing and brilliant POP family. Thank you so much for being here. We are so excited to have you on this last day of the event. And well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Vera. Grand welcome to each and every one of us. My name is Malinga Mida Hope. I'm Ugandan. I'm one of the mentors of the POP movement. And I would like to thank each and every one of you for your participation and attendance at this event. In Sacred Biocultural Territories, the economy is circular and sacred. Cultural expressions also have this characteristic. Every activity that takes place in these territories tends to be sacred and the deep respect among beings. This is the last session of the panel, Protecting Mother Earth and Nature, Voices of Indigenous Nations. On that note, I'd like to yield the floor to Vera take us through a brief introduction of the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Meda. Good morning. Thank you, Meda. As you were saying, therefore, it is important to mention that a sacred biocultural territory can be a mountain, volcano, the presence of caves, swamps, lagoons, forests, or jungles. These territories are being affected by climate change. It is time to seek collective strategies to protect them. To begin and to know a little more about what you are bringing up today, I give the floor, well, Dr. Mindaje was supposed to be here, but he couldn't join us. He has practiced and safeguarded the ancestral wisdom and philosophy of his people for many years. Mindaje wanted to say that these territories also have an important for ecological balance, not only because of the richness in them, they also have this sacredness, and we need to protect them because they are the ones who are helping us not to get even deeper into the climate crisis, and we need to help the original nations to protect them as they are the guardians and stewards for these territories. Thank you so much, Mira.
Thank you so much, Ms. Vera. I would like our first panelist to introduce herself, who is none other than Brenda. Brenda?
Good morning. I'm Brenda Colleen Cavalin, and I'm of mixed blood. I'm Mohawks, the Mohawks of Oksosny, and Irish and French. But I was not born and raised in the Haudenosaunee territory of my Mohawk ancestors, but I've been born and raised here in Sakamok, which is Sudbury, Ontario, Canada, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe Atikameksheng First Nations. And so my awakening to this way of being in relationship, in the spiritual relationship with our mother, Shkakamekwe, our mother, the earth, is a very new awakening for me. And even though I feel like a toddler in this realm of walking with these teachings, my body is of a grandmother as we wait for the arrival of this little one on its way. So what I have to share is not through the lens of a traditional knowledge keeper or speaking on behalf of a nationhood, but just through that which is being guided through dreams and through the spirits of the land and through the teachers that are coming our way. And there's a saying that says, when the student is ready, the teacher presents itself. I believe the same thing about when our spirits are ready, that those ancestors have been waiting to share this wisdom with us, and the time has come to start listening to the message that the ancestors are bringing, both of our blood and of the land. So I'm very humbled to be asked to be participating in this, and I even doubted what I might be able to contribute because I'm not in this traditional way for very long. But I feel an urgency that there is something that is emerging through many people that have doubts about what they are understanding or coming to understand and hearing. And so I hope that through that sharing, that maybe it would bring hope to people. So miigwech nyawa for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Ms. Brenda. We are equally glad to host you today. As Ms. Vera mentioned earlier on, you presented great aspects of leadership, and we look forward to learning from you. On that note, we'd like to go to the first question. What is the importance of the biological and cultural diversity in these territories? Ms. Brenda, the floor is yours.
Well, and I was thinking about this question. What came to me was that the culture that emerges from a territory is intimately connected and interconnected with the land that it comes from. So if you are ocean people, then your relationship is with the ocean life and the energy of the ocean. If you're woodland people, then your cultural expression comes from all that you see around you. I even understand that the songs that come to our people, they come from a place that echoes the pitches and the sounds of the animals. And so there's this beautiful relationship that begins to emerge in that communication in this language that we've forgotten about, which is a language that connects us with our clans. And the clans of our people come from the land where we reside, where we're born, where our women place the placenta of our children into the earth and give it back to the earth once our babies are born, and connecting us forever to that earth that we came from. So the culture of the people is intimately woven with the very earth that we come from. The diversity that we find within those specific ecosystems are our responsibility. And whenever we lose that relationship with the plant kingdoms, the plant nations, the animal nations, the winged creatures, the four-legged, the water creatures, with the spirit of the land, whenever we start to lose that relationship, there's a distance that begins to form between ourselves and the land. I remember my French grandfather from this area. He was, my papa was a potato farmer, and he never removed the peels from his potatoes. He always ate the peels because he said it's the very earth that we put back into our bodies. The very earth we come from is the earth that we put back into our bodies. All those minerals. In this territory, there's a tree, the maple tree, the sugar maple, that in the spring, it draws the water from the earth. And in that drawing of the water, it moves through its vessel and it collects all of the minerals that our body needs in the spring. Because if we are living in that traditional way, we will have just come out of a long winter. And in the traditional way, our food sources would have been nearly depleted by then. Our dried berries and our smoked fish and our jerky and things like that. So the maple tree water, that sweet water that rises up through the boughs, through the trunk rather of the tree, and we tap that water, it pulls from the very earth all the minerals that our body needs to replenish itself and to renew itself and to shake off the winter and get ready for all the abundance that's coming our way in the spring. And when the maple tree ends its cycle of giving us that sweet water, that first water of spring, that first medicine, the birch now takes over. The birch tree then draws from the earth. And when we tap that tree, it draws different minerals. And for the first time this year, my husband and I tapped the birch trees on our land. And we noticed the taste of the copper in the water. And I later learned that's one of the medicines that the birch tree draws from the land. So when we affect the soil, when we affect the other plants that are in relationship with these trees, then they can't have a fullness of what the gift is that they bring to our people. I remember thinking, as I started to research the story of my Irish ancestors who came here in the 1800s at the height of the potato famine that had happened in all of Europe, but especially hit hard in Ireland. And at that time, my ancestors were being evicted from their land, and many of them traveled the Atlantic Ocean to Canada and up the St. Lawrence Seaway. And they were dying, starvation, and of waterborne diseases. And one of the first medicines that were given to them, I like to imagine that these were my Mohawk ancestors giving that first medicine to my Irish ancestors as they landed. And they gave them that sweet water. And it's written in documents that that water was actually just maple water that can be boiled down and turned into maple syrup, which is this wonderful sweetener for our people. But that first water is very important. So I think when we explore all the interrelations on the land, it's really important to understand that the removal or the disregard of even one plant, of one clan, one animal system, that we disrupt an entire relationship, a spiritual and sacred relationship that existed long before humanity ever began to interact with it. Let me glitch.
Thank you so much, Brenda. Oh, sorry, I interrupted you, Meda. Thank you so much, Brenda. Alberto, do you want to add something to this question?
Yes, I can. I should explain. I was invited by Mendaki to participate in these, so I assumed he felt I had something to offer. I very much I'm Chicano, Zapoteca. I'm of Mexican Indian heritage, and very much like Brenda, did not grow up in my community. I grew up in the United States, and so my experience with traditional knowledge has been with my work in human rights. I'm a human rights advocate in the United Nations system. I've been doing it for about 30 years. And in the representation of indigenous communities before these human rights bodies. And I also represent my organization at the climate change conferences. I've been doing that since Copenhagen. But in all of that time working internationally, I also worked on the right to food and the Declaration of Atitlan, and you might be able to find it in the net. I was a chair that developed the Declaration of Atitlan that defined food sovereignty. And in that definition of food sovereignty, it defined the relationship between indigenous peoples and their means of subsistence. So that for the first part of all of this is, as Brenda was pointing out, there is a very deep spiritual relationship between the means of subsistence and the production of the means of subsistence and indigenous peoples. It is not just the production of food, but it is a very much a spiritual relationship that really predominates really what indigenous thought is about. It's all about the land. It's all about land. It has nothing more important to that relationship than land. That is what really defines indigenous peoples as opposed to minorities. Minorities do not have that relationship to land, but indigenous peoples do. And so for indigenous peoples to leave the land is to leave their spiritual existence. And I think it's been shown that that can be lost very quickly in one generation. If you remove people from the land and they go into the urban areas or into unknown territories, that relationship with their with their ancestors, with the land, can be lost. I think that's why I think the Rio Declaration talked about walking in the footsteps of our ancestors. That's where they walked. That's where we walk. That's where our future generations will also walk. There's been an interesting development with the National Congress of American Indians, which tends to be generally very conservative, business-oriented, as opposed to, well, I like to make the distinction between development and sustainability. In the business world, development is taking and eating until everything is gone. Whereas indigenous communities, I think, promote sustainability. It is their own vision of the future of their community and how to make it sustainable for future generations. We see ourselves as part of the web of life and not the dominant part, that we have an equal right with other species for life on Earth. But anyway, so the National Congress of American Indians tends to be generally business oriented, which is, I mean, at one point there was even one Canadian community whose leadership decided that they were going to outlaw sweat lodge. I mean, it's really bad. It can get very bad. The most healing process known to man that they ever wanted to outlaw it is primitive. Anyway, but they started this food sovereignty program. Whereas, because they see the need for sustainability of their own communities. And it turned out to be quite, how can I say, unexpected. They started to develop traditional agriculture. That is, I think we talk about the three sisters, corn, maize, and the beans, which is a very sacred, it's actually a very sacred three-part system of agriculture that replenishes the soil as it actually uses the soil. And so they found that youth was very interested in traditional agriculture, and the youth took it up, which was the first surprising thing, because youth, indigenous youth, they're into the internet, at least in North America. They have social media available to them, telephones, but they started taking it up and in learning the language of agriculture. They started learning the language of the ancestors. They started learning the traditions of the ancestors. And so a real significant, I think, lesson for us all was that there is a hunger in youth to return to those ways, but they may not be aware of it even. They may not know the language. They lose the language. The first thing that's lost is language, and with it a whole tradition. But they started to not only take an interest, but also start taking on traditional ways. And I think I think part of the lesson that we're learning is that youth itself, like as young people, are willing and able to open your minds up to these traditional ways, open your minds up to humanity as being part of the web of life. And part of humanity is itself an endangered species when it comes to climate change, much like the polar bear is much like other species. One thing that I think that the North, particularly Alaskan Native peoples, are beginning to adapt in a way that is also unexpected. They are finding habitat that is good for, still amenable to the polar bear. So they are rescuing polar bears and taking them to this habitat that is available, that is amenable to them. I think the Sami are also doing the same thing, of finding habitat that will save their species. I think one of the things that this whole correlation between our relationships to animals, I think this is in Alaska, is the caribou and the Gwich'in, and they're not only their physical and material dependence on the caribou, but also their spiritual dependence on the caribou, and the caribou migration, which is very much being affected by climate change. The rivers sometimes get swollen because of the melting ice, and the caribou can't cross it. And many times I heard a very sad story of the Gwich'in seeing baby caribou floating down the river drowned because the mothers could not give birth on the other side of the river. And so they, in their desperation, they tried to cross the swollen river, and they and their babies, they actually gave birth while they were drowning. So those things are very much a part of our existence. I think the United Nations is beginning to recognize at least the humanity and the value of traditional knowledge, of these traditional systems, of the traditional relationship. And they're developing through the Paris Agreement this platform for Indigenous knowledge. It's called the Local Communities and Indigenous Peoples Platform, Indigenous Knowledge Platform. It's being in development right now. You can do a search for it and find out what it's about. And that is the whole idea for us, at least for the Indigenous peoples that help develop it, is to get traditional elders to talk to each other, to try and use their collective wisdom to benefit humanity. Not that they don't have their own wisdom and use it at their local level, but we think it would be valuable if traditional elders from throughout the world were able to communicate. Unfortunately, our people, our elders, do not really rely on the internet very much. So virtual meetings are really are very difficult, but I think that and we had hoped to be able to bring them to the next COP, which will be in October. And the committee setting it up, the working group setting it up, we will be meeting face to face in October. But there's a danger to them. I mean, there's exposure to COVID, exposure to all, whatever happens to be the pandemic at the time is not, we don't think that that's a good idea. And besides that, although some elders, I know of one elder who can go, in spite of all the COVID restrictions on the COP, can go, but he's choosing not to go at this time because of the risk to his health. So it's going to take a long time, perhaps too long. But I think we do have, as peoples, a lot to offer with regard to the struggle against climate change, and that's being recognized by the United Nations. And all of these things that Brenda talked about, the relationship to the land, the means of really the importance of means of subsistence, not only spiritually, materially, but spiritually, all of those things are really relevant to the continued survival of humanity, really, in the face of climate change. Well, that was very long, but I hope it was useful. Thank you.
For sure. Oh, sorry, Made again.
Thank you so much, Albert, and thank you, Brenda. All I can say is that you really shared with us great insights. I would like to thank Brenda for acknowledging the facts and letting us know that we were brought to the earth and we keep taking in the earth. So it's up to each and every one of us to conserve what we take in. Not only is our health at stake, but also the health of the future generations to come. And I would like to thank Albert for letting us realize the greatness that the indigenous communities are presenting, which is having a deep relationship between them and diversity. And making us realize that it's not just all about business, but consider sustainability as well. I think that's a keynote, and each and every one of us needs to take it in. On that note, I would like to thank you all for that participation, and I'll yield the floor to Vera to ask the next question.
Thank you, Meda, and thank you to Alberto and Brenda. So the next question is, how do these territories help maintain balance in the planet's climate system? Brenda, if you would like to answer this question. Thank you.
It's such a vast concept to think of the little place, the little parcel of land that we stand on and we draw our source of life from. I was thinking about in that last question. There's something. There's a ceremony that that we hold each month, the full moon ceremony. And I'm reminded when we gather for that ceremony, it's for women. And it's a time to celebrate womanhood and to celebrate and to share the struggles we have as women, and to gain that support from that circle of women gathering as we offer our tobacco for a new moon. And we offer, when we prepare that tobacco, we think of those people or those things that we want to place our intention towards. And when we gather under that moon, that grandmother moon, that guides woman's waters, each moon is named something. So there's the strawberry moon, for example, in June. And it's a reminder of that first berry that comes our way. And there's a whole teaching about the berry fast and why we, in particular, look to that berry with a sacredness, and how in that little berry, how it carries its seeds on the outside of it, this very vulnerable sort of vessel that carries its seeds on the outside. And it's a reminder of how our women are invited to participate in a berry fast when they start their first moon time. And from the time that they begin that, they fast from berries. So they abstain from the berry for a full 13 moons. And at the end of that fast, during that time, they reflect on all those things that it means to be woman. And the grandmothers come and visit these young women while they're in their first moon time and they're in isolation. Not because it's something to be shunned, but it's a time for this young woman to go alone and reflect on what it is to become a woman. And during that time, the grandmothers come, the aunties come, and they share teachings with her. And during that time, she prepares her gifts that she's going to give away at the end of this fast, of this strawberry fast. And when those 13 moons have passed, she will have walked through those moons. So every one of those moons has a different name, and that name reflects what is happening in the world around us, in the plant kingdom and in the animal kingdom. It's the animal nations and the plant nations. And so she will have learned over 13 moons all those teachings about the responsibility that's connected to our people, about entering into a deeper relationship with that which is highlighted in those moons. At the end of her fast, I learned in the Haudenosaunee tradition, I met two traditional black ash basket makers at an Akwesasne powwow. And I noticed a basket leaning against the wall, and it had a red ribbon wrapped around, woven into the top of the basket. And I asked, what is that red ribbon representing in that basket? And she shared that that's what the women, that's what the young women weave the top of that basket when they've moved through those 13 moons and they have said no. They have learned to say with confidence and with conviction to say no to something. And it becomes an outward sign to man, to the men, to the young man, that this is a woman who has received those teachings and is now walking in this way. That she has learned the discipline of abstaining. And that to enter into a relationship with this young woman, you have to think again about the sacredness of who she is, with just that one little red ribbon. And so those moons, each having those names, remind us of all those teachings that come with each one of those moons. And that is another part of that relationship to ceremony and this very spiritual relationship that we're in. About protecting. This is what came to me as I was thinking about those moons, is the question about how do we maintain the balance? Well, for example, in one of those moons in the spring, in this territory, the moon is called the sucker moon, which is the fish. It's a certain fish that starts to flow in the spring. It's one of the first fish that make their way back. And I just learned recently that all along the shoreline up into Batchewana and on the north shore of Lake Huron, that there's really an unspoken report about the fish that we're not supposed to be consuming anymore because of the high mercury levels and the high toxicity levels in these fish. But they're not talking about that, right? Because they don't want to draw attention to their inactivity or their activities of not caring for our earth. And so by denying us access to our spiritual relationship in that moon and that relationship of welcoming back the suckerfish, they're impeding our ability to be in relationship with those. I'm thinking about, recently I heard that on the east coast of Canada, 2 unbelievable events just happened. One of them was a pod of orca whales were seen off the coast in the Canso Causeway. Orca are not from that territory. As a matter of fact, orca are from the west coast of Canada. So people were in disbelief. Why are orca on the east coast of Canada? Also, 2 weeks ago, there was a great white shark attack in Cape Breton, in the Cape Breton Highlands on a beach there. My daughter was visiting. She had been just at that beach that morning, and they switched beaches. And later on that day, there was a great white shark attack in that beach. And the people were mystified. They said, how are these, this is, the great white shark is not, this is not their territory. They don't venture this far up north. So some of what we're seeing now about this climate change, that we're coming to this new understanding, is the relationship of what our people have celebrated. For example, on the West Coast, on the coast nationhoods like the Salish First Nations, they have ceremonies out there that drum the salmon home. They celebrate the return of the salmon. And now the salmon are impeded their journey back home. The Pacific salmon lay their eggs in fresh water, and then they make a journey 7 years to the ocean. And then they make their journey home to lay their eggs and they, in essence, lay down their life when they lay their eggs. They somehow find their way home right to the very place they were born. And now with dams and redirection of water, sacred water systems, the salmon can't find their way home. And now they've had to resort to singing them home. And then what was shown in a dream was that they're lifting them with nets and they're dancing them to the other side in order to go and to feast that spirit bear. Because there's also our spirits that are waiting to be feasted. So the suspicion is that those salmon are finding a different route. And because the waters are changing temperatures, the salmon are moving. And because the salmon are on the move, the orca are on the move. And because the water temperatures are changing, other whale populations are moving, and that would normally be the food source for the shark And so the shark are now following different whales, not the orca, but different animals. And the shark attack on the East Coast, I understand they understood this to be that the shark thought that the person was a seal, which is their normal food source. So we're seeing this relationship of this brokenness, of a disconnect between how we are with the land and the disregard we have with the land. And the template to return or to restore that is given to us by our ancestors in these ceremonies. And so that message of hope that comes through that is, if we return to the land, if we return to the way of our ancestors, there too we'll find a way for us, like Alberto was just sharing about the Sami looking for new ways in order for there to find habitat for the animals. And in essence, we're intimately reliant on that as well. When our clans are healthy and well, then we are healthy and well. As an Eagle Clan member, I am intimately woven with the salmon. And so anything that happens to the salmon clan, I take notice of, because that is also my responsibility. And woven throughout all of that is the responsibility of woman to the water and the protection of that water. I'll expand on that perhaps with another question, and I'll leave us with that.
Thank you so much, Brenda. Yes, it is. We are not related to anything. I am not related to the earth where I live, or the territory where I live. That's something that no one taught me when I was little. I mean, we keep moving around the city, and so I don't feel grounded. And I think that happens to many of us. We don't feel related to the earth, or we don't have that connection to the earth. And also something that almost brought me to tears was that everything for original nations is related. Just like you said, the raspberry, I'm not sure if it was but I mean, everything's related, and every stage of a person's life is celebrated, and everyone joins, and they try to explain what's next. And for me, I mean, for none of us, I think it was like that. We just went through puberty, and then we were adults, and then we had children, and now we're trying to survive this pandemic and everything. But no one's ever sat with me and explained me that the moon was related to me in any way, or that my body needed to be celebrated. I mean, I come from a Catholic family, and my period was something that needed to be hidden. I couldn't speak about it. If I had to buy something like tampons or anything, I needed to hide them. And my dad couldn't see it because he was a man. So many things are not celebrated, and it is part of life. And that, I believe, that's what separates us even more from who we are. Because I mean, we don't celebrate the earth, and we don't feel part of it. And I believe that's really what we need to learn from you, to relate everything and just to feel part of everything. That's so, I mean, I have my notes, and I will go back to them. But
May I add one more thing?
Yes, please.
I'm sorry, the thought about the strawberry, which was important, I kind of went somewhere and I forgot to return to an important point I was about to make about the strawberry. And it came in the form of a dream, because I have two younger daughters that had already had their moon time by the time I was awakening to this beautiful ceremony that celebrates woman. And in our tradition in the lodge, when a woman is on her moon time, she's cared for. She doesn't handle any of the medicines or the sacred items because she is in ceremony. When she's on her moon time, that is a ceremony. And so we celebrate her, and she's the first to be fed when it's mealtime. And we care for her because we are acknowledging that egg that is formed in our mother's wombs. So when we're a daughter, when we are a female being formed in our mother's womb, all the eggs of the next generation are being formed in that female in the womb. And so in essence, my daughter shared a womb with me, and they shared a womb with my mother. So 3 generations are together in that one womb. And what came to me in a dream was, it was June, and I went out, and that's when the strawberries are ready, the field strawberries, the ones that grow naturally on the land. And they're tiny. They're not like those big ones you get from California in the grocery store, okay? They're not like the size of crab apples. They're juicy and sweet and beautiful, and they're tiny, like just the size of the end of my thumb. And in the dream, I went out and I harvested the strawberries, and I came in, and they were flowing out of the garden. They were all over. I was even walking on them. And I brought in this big bowl, and I said to the girls, eat all you want of the strawberries in June. And then I went back out to get them more. And then what had replaced the strawberry was the blueberry. And again, I filled a whole bowl, and it was overflowing. And I came in and I said, eat all the blueberries you want in July until you have your fill. And I went back to get more, and it was replaced with raspberries, which is the berry of August. And the same thing happened again. And so what came to me in that dream was that we are supposed to be eating the fruit of the season in the season. And then with those strawberries, the young women that are on their strawberry fast, they harvest those berries and they make jam with them that year, or they freeze dry them to put into meals in the winter time, or they dry them. And so that what came to me, the teaching that came through that dream was to eat in season and to make amends for that strawberry, because we have within the full moon ceremony, there is the berry, there's the lifting of the berry, and there's a prayer spoken for that berry. And so we go to the grocery store in February to get our strawberry. And when, in fact, what was the invitation was to remind us to go back to the land and to try those berries, or maybe just to lift up some jam in February. So I just wanted to share that because it's an important awakening to the understanding of how the teachings are coming and reminding us to go back to the land, and all of the template is there for us, even in that small teaching about the berry. It
is not small at all. It holds so much wisdom in it, that berry, and the relationship to the earth, and just to thank the earth and our bodies and become one with the earth. It's so beautiful. Thank you so much, Brenda. Alberto, do you want to add something to this question?
Well, well, what I was thinking as Brenda was speaking was that it's the Haudenosaunee women who choose the chiefs. And if they don't like the chief, they can replace him. And I think that feminism is an interesting issue. I think it's true that in the dominant society, women are undervalued and they're not paid as much. They're given worse jobs. They're not given really the attention they deserve. As we were talking earlier, a woman taking care of her children is not considered productive work. It's unpaid. And that's the dominant society. But in an indigenous society, as Brenda was pointing out, those are extremely important roles. The role of creation, that's the women's role. And I think that that really talks to the balance, talks to the value of life, talks to our just our way of being. I think it's a very important point to make, that men are really have their function, but it is women. Women are also the carriers of culture. That is a proven fact. They teach the children the culture. It's the role of women in Indigenous society is extremely important. It's not a, how can I say it? I don't know how else to say it. Sometimes, well, I think that that's a lesson that men have to learn. I think that the masculine principle in the dominant society is one of domination and greed, I think, to many respects. But I think that the balance that women bring to life is a lesson that we continually have to learn. I think men have to step back. I think in Western society, there's a woman, I forget her name. She was a Australian, I think, or New Zealand. That talked precisely about this, how men are warlike, how men are belligerent, and I mean, all these terrible things that men are. I mean, what can you say? You know, war is conducted by men. I don't know if there must be women generals by now, but I don't know if that's really a useful endeavor for a woman. I mean, prime ministers are acting like men. You know, I think Thatcher was even worse than a man in many respects. But anyway, I think that's a lesson that we can, Indigenous cultures can teach the rest of the world. And I think the rest of the world perhaps is learning it, as Vera was pointing out. You know, it's the life-giving tendencies of women are not to be hidden. They're not to be ashamed about. They're part of who we are, all of us. So I thank Brenda for reminding us of that, because it's true. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alberto. And thank you, Brenda. Mira, do you want to carry on with the next question?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Vera. Thank you, Brenda and Mr. Alberto, for those amazing responses. So we'd like to move to the next question, which I think will be directed to Vera. How to raise awareness of the importance of these sites in all sectors of society? Vera, the floor is yours.
Are you asking me to respond? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, this is where I thought, where my thoughts went to about building awareness, and the awareness around, especially our primary source of life, which is water. And I had shared with Vera on the last time that we had gathered for another event about a reminder of that first responsibility of woman as giver of life. We are the carriers of that first waters of life, and we're the vessel that the spirit realm moves from spirit and takes on a physical form through our vessel. And so that water, that protection of water, that water world that is first in the wombs of woman, is a reminder of our first responsibility as women to the waters and protecting the waters. Recently in our territory here in Sudbury. So Sudbury is a mining town. And for the longest time, I don't know if it still speaks hails this, but we were the nickel capital of the world. That's what I grew up with as a child, was this big banner of we were the nickel capital of the world. But part of the reality of the mining, the open pit mining that originated here, was that Sudbury used to be called Saint Anne among the Pines, or Saint Anne of the Pines. And there was an ancient pine forest that used to have its existence right here on this land that I live. And the original smelting process required the furnaces to be fed to heat up for that process. And so what basically happened is Sudbury was a city that was never meant to be. It was supposed to be this temporary extraction site of the minerals in the land in the 1800s. And so I think most Sudburyans are kind of shocked to, that we've transitioned into an actual bona fide city, because for the longest time we were a mono economy. We were all reliant on the mine to generate the economy here in Sudbury. So we've since diversified, but what we've inherited is this ugly secret, which was the chopping down of all the trees to feed the fires, the furnaces, resulted in the erosion of all our soil, the exposure of this rock, and then the smelting process produced this what was called acid rain, and then the rocks have all since turned black, and this acid rain really wreaked havoc on the plants and the soil and the water systems. And there was a huge regreening program that started about 25, maybe 30 years ago now. And people who had since left Sudbury and then returned didn't recognize the place, because our landscape was like, they actually used our landscape to test for some of the astronauts doing testing for a walk on the moon. We were called like the moonscape city for the longest time. So if you can imagine all that sort of imagery, and who would want to live in a place like that? So what happens is this regreening program starts, and it completely altered the way our landscape looked. The sad part is a lot of monocrop. So, easy trees planted in order to get things moving, but there was never a real restoration of the fungus and all of those smaller plants that contribute to this whole ecosystem. What really is the problem is the impact it has on our water. And so Lake Ramsey, I don't know if it's still the case, but is at the center of our city, and it's our drinking water. And we're the largest city built around a freshwater lake. And recently, a woman who has received the teachings from our late grandmother, Josephine Ba, who's the water walker, was shown through a fast and through dreams to bring us into ceremony, into this water walk ceremony, to walk the waters of Junction Creek. And Junction Creek is a creek. It's small in size, but its length goes all the way from Sudbury, through the mining, all the tributaries of waters that come from the mines, all the way through Junction Creek, straight down through to Lake Huron. And she was shown to bring that ceremony to this territory. The traditional territories of the Atikameksheng, Anishinaabe, Atikameksheng, and Wanapitei First Nations. And in that ceremony, although a part of that ceremony is about raising awareness, it's not the focus of the ceremony. It's a byproduct. It's to be in ceremony. It's to carry that water. And we as women take turns to carry that vessel of water. And once the water starts moving on its path, it doesn't stop. And one walks with us that carries that staff, who's our protector, so that we can just put all of our prayers and all of our thoughts into that water. And we speak for that water, and we pray for that water, for the healing of the water. And sometimes even in that prayer, in that ceremony, that took us 4 days to go from Garson, from the headwaters in Garson, all the way to Lake Huron, which was, we touched down at Spanish, which is the site of the Spanish residential school. And a ceremony was had there because our children are waking us up. The children that have been buried are starting to come to the people in dreams. And so a ceremony was had there after the women took turns carrying that water. And we walked hundreds of kilometers with that water. And part of that walking, what comes sometimes is a healing for the people and a profound connection to our responsibility to protect that water. The very water that comes from the source of our mother, from deep within the earth, is the source of that fresh water. We're told that what we do to our mother, the earth, we do to ourselves. And what we do to our women on the land, we are doing to our mother. And when we rape the land, we are raping our mother. And when we destroy her water systems, her source of life for the people, we also destroy our women when we destroy our mother. And we create a chasm between our women and our ceremony. There was a woman I met about 5 years ago, Tila Najawan, and she presented in Geneva. And I understand it was the first time they presented from this perspective about the water condition, because the world was not listening. When we said, do you not understand that when we commodify water, when we destroy our water systems, it's destroying all of us. It's not just destroying the Indigenous people that hold these waters sacred. It's all for all of us. This is our source. And so what she presented on was from the perspective of religious freedoms. The denying us access to fresh, flowing, aquifer, living water denies us access to our spiritual expression. And I think if we don't understand the intimate relationship between all that we do and the ancient forests that we cut down, and the interconnectedness of how those forests communicate across the land, and the forests communicate through their root system to the very waters. I'm reminded this hat that I've started to bead, all the teachings that have started to come my way. In this hat, I beaded that great tree of peace that the Haudenosaunee people, we now walk under the banner of the great law of peace. And at the time when our men in a deep hole below a great tree planted and left and put to the earth their implements of war, there was a great river system below in those roots that swept the implements away, never to be found again, to be reminded that we walk under this banner of peace. It's the water that gives us life. It's the water that cleanses us. It's the water that brings us together, those travel systems. It's the water that allows our salmon to return home and to give birth to the next generation. And it's the water that's going to wash away and all the way down to the oceans. So I think we're ignorant if we don't understand that the cutting down of great ancient forests has an absolute impact on a grand scale. I think about the women on the West Coast, the tiny house warriors that are on the front lines, trying to stop that line 3 from being pushed through territories that are polluting water systems and obstructing the pathway of the source of food for their people and the animals. I think about the Mi'kmaq women on the East Coast at the Treaty Truck House. The absurdity of what is being proposed out there. The damaging of their waters, their freshwater system, which is not just for the Mi'kmaq from there, but for all of the people. It's just inconceivable that we don't understand that this is all related. The ancestors, the elders, they speak. They say we're at a tipping point, and maybe we're even past that. And the way to move through this, what is coming, is to go back to the ways of the land and the ways of our ancestor. To learn how to bake bread in the hot sand on the beach, as what was shared by this beautiful Mi'kmaq man that I met. And he shared the story, and a woman that shared her story about how she remembers her mother baking bread and burying it in a tea towel and burying it in the sand while they harvested salmon and eel and clams and mussels. And when they were finished their work, they would pull the sand away and there would be this fresh baked bread waiting for them. We need to go back to those ways and live from the land and the abundance that the land has to offer. And we need to protect our water systems. It's the source of our life. Amigwech. Nyawa.
Thank you so much, Brenda. Alberto, do you want to add something to this question? Thank you.
Well, I know we're kind of short on time, but I think what Brenda was talking about was extremely important. I think water is life. I think there are communities all over North America, at least, and I think in many parts of the world, that defend their water without knowing their contribution to the struggle against climate change. Their water is, I mean, I visited a Mapuche community a couple of years ago, and the river was sick. And that's what they said, our river is sick because they were dumping pollutants in it. It's just tremendous ignorance about water. Water is not only life, water is alive. Water is, and it is a life that we must share. I mean, we use it, we abuse it, but it is our life. I think what Brenda was talking about was extremely important. I happened to meet Josephine once and a while ago. The water walker, she walked around the Great Lakes all around all of the Great Lakes. A very, I think, I won't forget her friendship. She died recently, I think. Well, recently for me is maybe years for somebody else, but I just wanted to point out how important Brenda's contribution to this issue of water. I think in many respects, ecologies, if you leave them alone, they will fix themselves. They will adapt themselves, I think. But we all need water. Everyone needs water. Every living species needs water. Water itself is alive. All those principles are extremely important to our understanding of what's happening to the world today, and the kinds of knowledge that we have to incorporate in order to survive as a human species. So I thank Brenda for that. It was a very important contribution.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry, I'm speechless, and I am so outraged and so moved by everything that Brenda brought up. And yes, it is our responsibility to take care of this earth. And thank you, Brenda. Vane, please.
Thank you so much, Vera, and a big apology. I think Mera is having a little bit of network issues. So, are you there, Mera? Mera?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Thank you so much, Vera. Thank you so much, Vanessa and Brenda, alongside Albert. I'm so sorry I had to turn off my video due to network issues. However, I would like to say that it's really deep cultural content that has been presented to us.
Yeah, maybe I can continue, Mira, if you're having a little
serious
bit.
facts that the general.
Yeah, we are not able to hear you. It's cutting a little bit. So sorry.
Yes, serious facts that the.
If you.
Okay, so,
yeah.
okay, so serious facts that the generation needs to learn and take in if we ever hope to heal from climate change and its effects. As you gave example of water, which is not just destroying the indigenous people and everyone else. Same technique applies to all other natural resources around us. And as Dr. Albert presented, water is a life that we must share and not abuse as well. So thank you so much. And I really hope that everyone takes note of what has been these great insights that you've shared with us. And on that note, I would like to yield the floor to Vera to ask the next question.
Thank you, Meda. What strategies can be followed to prevent the human hand from destroying the sacred biocultural territories? Alberto, please, if you can answer this question. Thank you.
Well, there are I think we have to defend there's several strategies I think are all important. I think the primary one, the one that we talked about here a lot, is really building our own sustainable communities, contributing to the sustainability of our own homes, of our own people, where we are. And I think that it will do, and that means also food security. It means alternative energy. It means our own housing, our own traditional housing, or whatever housing you have in the cities. But it means building our own, taking our own responsibility for our own survival. But it also, there are several international, national and international strategies that we are following now in The very first one, the top on our list for our organizations, the defense of communities that are resisting this capitalist exploitation, this colonialism, by the opposition to their pipelines, opposition to their extractions, to their mines, to their taking, to their eating, everything that is necessary for human life until it's all gone. And that's why really, I think I've made the point before that the reason 80% of biodiversity is found on indigenous lands is because the dominant society has eaten theirs up and they have nothing left, and we have to preserve it really for humanity. So that is one strategy is to really support our communities wherever they are, whether they be in the global south or in the global north or in Canada or in the United States or in the Amazonian communities in South America. Colombia is really one of the worst in assassinating people who are defending their rights, who are indigenous peoples. Actually, in Colombia, I think there's an environmental defender killed every 2 weeks. I mean, that's where we are. But our people are resilient, our people are determined. And so it is our duty, I think, to defend them as best we can, to give voice to their voice, to lend our strength to their strength, and try and bring about some peace. But we need desperately to defend them. And that is really, I think, that's really, I think, absolutely necessary. The other strategy that we're following, I do a report called Banking on Climate Chaos. And we have a divestment campaign. Who are financing fossil fuels? Who are financing the pipelines that are now threatening the Mississippi water system? I mean, they're building a pipelines, oil pipelines in the headwaters of the Mississippi. All of the millions of people that rely, not just indigenous peoples, but all of the people that rely on the Mississippi as their source of water. I mean, it's totally irresponsible. It's just inconceivable. Inconceivable. I think Brenda used the word inconceivable. It is inconceivable. How can they be so irresponsible? But in any event, we are finding out who's financing. The oil companies are not going to give it up. They're not going to cut their own throats. They're not going to say, "Oh, we're making a mistake here. We should stop producing oil." They're just not. I'm sorry. They're not going to do that. But we can reach the banks that finance these pipelines, and we have a divestment campaign through the Rainforest Action Network. I think if you look at it, if you look for it in the internet, you'll find it's called Banking on Climate Change or Banking on Climate Chaos. This year we called it Banking on Climate Chaos. I write the human rights essay, but what's important in the report is the data. What banks are financing what pipelines? What banks are in fact, at the COP, we're hoping, I've been suggesting that we have an exhibit where people can come and tell us what corporations are ruining their lives, and we can tell them who's financing them. Because if we can it's their water. Money is their water. And if we take their water, we ask people to take their money out of Chase. We ask people to take their money out of JP Morgan Chase banks, about the worst financiers. We're asking the city retirement funds. We're asking them to stop investing in these banks. And then in Europe, it's worked a lot better than the worst right now in private banks are the American banks, JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo. There's 4 of them that are really have trillions of dollars invested in oil. So we go to their shareholder meetings. We have demonstrate in front of their headquarters. Wells Fargo Bank is headquartered here in San Francisco, and we have parties once. Before the pandemic, we had a party once a week in front of them, drawing street art, blocking traffic, to bring attention to that these banks are financing climate change. We're now also focusing on insurance companies. Who insures these projects? And we want them to stop insuring these projects. Well, as a matter of fact, alternative energy is now cheaper than oil. So that a lot of the banks themselves, because of the profit motive, are saying, well, we don't want to invest in a dying industry. So many banks are really just, as a matter of business necessity, withdrawing their investments. So we still have a great amount of money being invested in oil and fossil fuels. So we hired the investment campaigner, and we hope to be able to start hitting the banks even harder to make them stop financing greenhouse gas emissions. So there are various strategies, but I think the most important one is to defend our communities. That is really the one thing that we must do, because they're the ones that are really holding the line against this climate change. Well, they may not even be aware of it, but they are. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alberto. And yes, you are completely right. We need to check our banks and check our governments, and because they are subsidizing our own destruction with our money. And we also have the meat industry and the oil companies, and everyone is like in this huge, I don't know, boat just destroying Earth. And just staying side to side and alongside the communities is the best way to help them. And well, thank you. Brenda, do you want to add something to this?
Yeah, I struggled with this question because the whole realm of Wall Street and lawyer language and that kind of stuff sort of, it gets my head in a swirl, and I get agitated and I get all fired up, and so I'm not really comfortable with that, the language that comes with all of that sort of movement and mobilization. And but I was reminded, though, there was through Josephine, it was spoken that this time would come that water would become a commodity, and it would be bought and sold, and it would come to a point that water would be worth more than gold. And just this past year, I noticed that water is now in the stocks. It's a commodity. And what I used to share with my youth, I used to be a coordinator of youth ministry, and I was a leader member with the Catholic Organization for Development and Peace. And every year within our communities, we would have a campaign. So there would be people that would leave the global north and travel to someplace in the global south to listen to the people, to hear their stories. And then they would bring these stories back to Canada. And then they would sort of chew on them, and they would say, how can we build awareness about these issues? And then how can we build effective campaigns? And so one of those campaigns, was focused on water issues. And one of the things that I said to my youth, that we were working together with grappling with these issues, I said, you have a lot of power as a consumer to move markets. And if you just stop supporting bottled water, it would collapse that industry. It would no longer be something that would be something desirable to invest in. And it would, in that, coupled with that, meeting with the powers that be to remind them of their responsibility to provide potable drinking water for their citizens. And then in particular, First Nations communities across our land in Canada. I can't even remember what the last count, it was something absolutely horrendous, like 132 communities are still under a boiled water advisory and still can't even bathe in their water because they get scabies or other waterborne diseases. So it's inconceivable that in a developed nation that we have people that are living in abject poverty and without access to water. And so looking at our consumer power, and the other thing too is honoring the treaties. We are all treaty people in Canada. I can't speak for other countries. I don't know how that whole treaty system has worked or even exists in other countries. But in Canada, we're reminded that we are all treaty people. Those of European settlement that have come here and have mixed with the Indigenous of this land, we have all entered into those treaties together. The two-row wampum speaks of, you stay in your ship, we stay in our canoe, we share this beautiful land, we don't steer your ship, you don't steer ours. We entered into that treaty hundreds of years ago, and we're not honoring those treaties that were put in place in order to ensure this beautiful life for 7 generations to come. And those treaties are being broken or ignored, and our people are being held up in court systems. There's injunctions coming out left, right, and center in every time that our people are on the front lines holding that space between fishing rights and land access rights from sea to sea, from coast to coast to coast. It's right across our land. I remember in one of the campaigns, which was a really touchy subject in Sudbury, as you can imagine, because it was about mining practices that we were reflecting on. And what we were proposing is a postcard signing to our government at the time, that we said the same guidelines and protocols expected of Canadian mines in Canada should be expected of Canadian mines operating in foreign countries. And we were discovering that that wasn't necessarily true, that some of our Canadian mines were not operating in ethical ways in foreign countries. And so that campaign was successful in producing a law that required Canadian mines to behave and to follow protocols in the same expectation of them in Canada to behave the same way in foreign countries. So those are really powerful moments that when we recognize that the people have a voice, and we do have our governments that can affect that change. I think Alberto really spoke well to this subject, because this sounds like something he's more versed in than I am. I'm a little bit more emotional, kind of a hands-on kind of person. So with that, that's all I really have to share with that. And then the last thing I would like to speak is for those people that are listening, that to not disregard the messages that are coming to you. I can sense from the sharing that's happening across the land that people are struggling with this. They're hearing the messages from the ancestors. They're hearing the messages that's coming from spirit in the dream world, in fasts, in those moments of silence. They're being guided. And it's because of the love our ancestors have for us. The idea of us rested in their hearts when they were doing the work on the land generations before. And the idea of that love is alive, and it's moving, and it's coming in dreams. I was reminded, I met a young woman, young Mi'kmaq woman, who spoke about that this time, the sadness of this time would be that there will be elders, and elders don't necessarily mean people with gray hair. There will be people that have pieces of the puzzle, that have pieces of this scattered knowledge. They will have that inside of them, and they will have spent a whole lifetime, and no one will have asked them for that knowledge to share it. Because we will not know, we don't know how to ask, or we're too shy to ask, or we don't really want to speak about those wonderful spiritual things that are unfolding. And we're afraid of rejection, or afraid of being named as crazy. The prophecies are alive, The ancestors are filled with love and want us to find our way back to that source of love that we came from. And so open yourselves up, risk that, risk speaking what's being shown, and find a way to go and ask for that knowledge to be remembered, to be regathered. That scattered knowledge is starting to come together, and all of us contain, even in our very DNA, we contain a direction for this. And our ancestors have left clues for us along the way, in ceremony, and even on the land, in those pictographs, in those drawings that are in the land, in the rock structures that are mysteriously placed in some configurations, and those sacred sites must be protected. Our sacred sites is of paramount importance to have access to those sacred sites and offerings to the land. With that, I say miigwech, Yahweh, for allowing me to share what it is that I have to share today. Miigwech.
Thank you so much, Brenda. I'm out of words. I'm really, this was such a moving and just, I don't know, I'm out of words. I think that you both did an amazing job and were so kind, and thank you so much, Brenda and Alberto. Really, we need to defend these territories, and we need to come together, and we need to evolve together. And just like you said, we need to ask the ones who have the knowledge, and we have a responsibility to this earth. So we need to work together if we want to have a livable planet, not just for us as a species. We need to secure a livable planet for every species that we share this world with. Thank you so much. Thank you to the POP family. Thank you, Dr. Norma. Thank you so much to Mindahi Bastida, who brought us all together today. And thank you, Ash Pachauli, who was kind enough to let us use his platform to have this meeting, and just to bring this wisdom that Alberto and Brenda shared with us today. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, Mida, so much. And we're going to close this event. Thank you. If I keep speaking, I will cry. So thank you so much. I was crying with you, Brenda, when you speak. Thank you so much. Thank you to the both of you. If you don't mind, we would like to take a picture, a photo, just to commemorate this beautiful day. So if everyone can turn on their cameras so we can take it.
1, 2, smile. Great. I just also wanted to add that we are working on a declaration of this 5-day event, and we would like to invite you, Alberto and Brenda, to be part of this declaration. I have shared the link in the chat to make the registration for adding your signature. So we would love to have you participating on that, since we have discussed really important subjects during this 5-day event. And it was important to mention that we had sessions in Spanish and English, and also we attend with more than 5 countries attending, all the continents, people from Africa, people from Latin America. So it will be a really great declaration with all these important inputs and information that everybody from the original nations shared. Thank you so much for your assistance, and thank you for being here with us and sharing all your wonderful knowledge.
Thank you so much to everyone. Thank you and see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Bye.
all for being around.